Electro. I'm sure that this element is on everyone's minds now that the Archon of it has returned once again. Though when I look at the Electro roster and compare it to the likes of the Hydro, Animo, and Pyro rosters, I start to wonder, compared to the rest of the elements in this game, is Electro a mid element? So today, I thought it'd be fun to take a look at Electro's best characters, compare them to the best characters of other character rosters, and see how big of a role Electro actually plays in the modern Genshin meta. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. First, I think it's worth starting out with the rough reputation that Electro used to have, way back in the pre-Dendro era. For the longest time, Electro was considered a less than savory element. It infamously housed very weak characters, such as Keqing, and before Dendro came out, units such as Kuki Shinobu and Lisa both had very few meta use cases. There were some good Electro characters, of course. Raiden Shogun back in the 2.x era was actually quite the impressive character. But if you missed out on her back then, yet want to give her a go now, she's on banners. Yet you're gonna need Primo Gems, but where can you go to afford cheaper Primos? Well, Loot Bar is here to save a day. Loot Bar is a fantastic service which can offer you cheaper Genesis Crystals and Stellar Jades compared to the official prices shown in-game. Take a look at this comparison between the cost of crystals from Loot Bar and then from the game's top-up store. If you're new, then you can claim a coupon which grants you an amazing 5% off, and the prices are up to 20% cheaper compared to the official channel. Loot Bar is an absolutely safe service, and has an endless amount of positive reviews. How can you use the site? Well, allow me to show you. First, input your UID. That's right, you need no login information whatsoever. Choose your desired package, and then you'll get your delicious Primos delivered to you. This is all legit since the site uses a VPN, which is how they cheapen the Primo Gems, and official top-up methods are used. Check out Loot Bar today to save on all your gacha needs. She was a great character in spite of her element. It wasn't that Raiden was super good because she was Electro, or that her being Electro really contributed to her success. It was more so her kit being really strong and providing some super good synergies at the time. It did help a bit, of course, as Electro Charged keeps both the Hydro and Electro aura on enemies for a short time. You can then use an Electro character for higher Hydro uptime, which allowed Raiden to help keep Xiangling consistently vaping and rational, but outside of that, it was mostly Raiden's kit itself that pushed her up so high in the meta. She had bundles of value with her energy restoration, plus what was at the time rather cutting-edge damage. Her ease of use was excellent, and she's still super easy to pilot to this day. Also, Raiden's constellations were held to an extremely high regard, and for good reason too, because back then a C2 to 3 Raiden was as strong as your average C6 DPS of the time. Considering how the power spike was only down to C2, the constellation seemed downright broken, as this was before the time where every single C2 was some crazy big upgrade. It was good for a lot of units of course, but not for every. C3 only exemplified the insanity, and Raiden did genuinely feel like the best character possible during her time. Even at C0, she was still very strong. In fact, it was pretty common to underrate her because you needed her C2, which wasn't true at all. This misconception came from the Abyss where there was a debuff that made C0 Raiden feel like poo-poo pants. Yet, for every Inazuma Abyss after that, she felt great. Raiden Shogun was undoubtedly the best Electro character back during Inazuma. There were a few other powerful kickers back then. For example, Fischl. She was always really nice in Electro Charge teams and always had really high flexibility. I'd say that the introduction of Dendro boosted her from a great character to a really great one, and she also worked pretty nicely in Raiden teams, which was a plus. There was also the somewhat forgotten Queen, Beidou. She was one of Fischl's best partners in crime, being a complete and utter AoE beast. Fischl helped restore her burst and provide some single target, while Beidou fried all the trash mobs. It was truly a mutually beneficial synergy. The Abyss back then was also a lot more multi-target friendly, meaning that Beidou had the opportunity to shine far more often than she does now. I feel like she barely sees any discussion nowadays, let alone use. These were the three horsemen of good Electro characters. Fischl and Beidou did actually take advantage of being Electro because of how Electro Charged works, allowing for easy double swirls and such, whereas Raiden simply had a crazy strong kit. When you take a look at the Electro characters who were considered bad, such as Keqing, take a look at what she provided compared to what the others provide. Keqing provides a lot of Electro application, like a lot, and really fast too, but because the element had little value outside of EC pre-Dendro, that didn't matter much. Yae Miko had a whole slew of issues when she came out. Targeting issues, low numbers, not having any best in slot team. It was rough for Yae fans. The issue was that she released ahead of her time and only got her best teammate when Sumeru came out. I'm not sure how hot this take is, but Yae is more of a DPS than a support or sub-DPS in my opinion. Yes, you can play her as such, and she's good in Tainari spread teams when played as such, but her extremely long field time leads me to believe that she was always intended as more of a DPS unit. Then you look at Fischl with a super ergonomic kit, being able to do solid single target numbers of repositioning and solid batterying, Beta with her nutty AoE prowess, a neat C6 which complements Fischl, and Raiden with her ability to supercharge powerful units such as Xingqiu, Xiangling, and Bennett while doing great numbers herself. I will say that I'm a firm believer that Childs International was better than Rational during Inazuma, but I will say that Raiden at least had ease of use and comfort in that team. She had her good applications. So essentially an Electro character had to do more than just apply Electro. That wasn't enough to enter the higher echelons of the meta. But could you really call Electro bad at the time when it had 3 great characters? If we want to take it literally, yes, because every unit who only applied Electro and did nothing else was bad. Compare that to Hydro, where characters who only apply Hydro and do nothing else can still have a chance to be viable. Though if you want to evaluate by characters, then Electro was at the very least fine. It's hard to say it was truly great when Cryo, Hydro, and Animo dominated it so hard, because this was back during the Freeze era, and debatably even Pyro because of Bennett, Xiangling, and Hu Tao. But the 3 best Electros during Inazuma were the saving graces of the Electro Element. Things did in fact take a turn when Sumeru came out. Electro went from being kind of whatever as its own element to being pretty solid when paired with Dendro. A whole slew of new options rolled in for the once desolate element. Aggravate, finally make Ching's quickfire Electro application good. She could proc a whole ton of Fischl A4s, and since Aggravate also improved Fischl's damage, who was already a good unit, the team actually became quite respectable. Yai Miko, her main DPS playstyle finally became realized, and while she still remains as a rather slow and perhaps clunky unit to play depending on who you are, her damage more than makes up for all that. Plus, her synergy with Fischl is absolutely stellar in this team, with how she provides the Fox Lady with energy and A4s. Hyperbloom gave the once useless Kukishinobu a chance to seriously shine, giving her an archetype that not only benefited her building EM, but also gave her a very definitive slot in. It also gave Raiden Shogun a new alternative use case that allowed her to remain relevant in what was at the time a new region. She did well too. Her range of Electro application was very large, and the earliest Hyperbloom teams featured her heavily. Spread was also neat for characters like Fischl and Yai as another cool way of using them effectively. Point is, Sumeru really helped out the Electro Element, though unfortunately a warrior would inevitably have to fall in the crossfire, that being Beto in this case. She fell into obscurity the longer the time went on as attention shifted away from Taser and began to hone in on Hyperbloom instead, Electro Charged replacement. F in the comments for Beto, everybody. Then enter Fontaine. Electro once again finds itself in a, no, not necessarily a quote-unquote bad spot, more like a forgettable or irrelevant spot. New Fontainian DPS has outdamaged Raiden so much that she just wasn't all that impressive anymore. Compare a C0 Raiden's performance to a C0 Nervalette, Arlecchino, or Linny. It's absolutely bonkers. Fischl stayed good. Good for her. In fact, you could argue that she got even better since she got pretty good with both Nervalette and Chloriander, not to mention the addition of 4-piece Golden Troop and Fontaine, which elevated her already good damage, plus the addition of Chevre's Overload comps into the meta. While characters like Yai and Kuki retain their use cases, I would argue that newer teams outdamaged their best teams by quite a bit. Clorox especially fixed pretty much everything wrong with Aggravate. She's a fast DPS that self-heals and isn't even truly an Aggravate DPS, because she can play super well in other teams too, such as Hyper and Overload, while still being the best Aggravate DPS if she wanted to be. Ultimately, Clorox is an Electro character, so this is a win for the Electro Element, let's be real. Sethos also came out. Whoa. Anyways. Electro didn't get any worse, but it didn't get any better either, it simply stagnated. Well, that's not entirely true, I'd say it got a decent bit better with Chloriander, plus the extra official teams. You currently use Electro for either Overload teams of Chevre's, Hytham Quickbloom, and Clorox teams in general. I think we can all agree on those being Electro's most meta use cases in the current day. Then, to compare the best Electro characters to the best characters of other elements, we'll take the 4 best characters from each element. For Electro, that would be Chloriander, Fischl, Kukishinobu, and Raiden Shogun. Pyro, the best 4 are Bennett, Xiangling, Arlecchino, and Linny. Do I seriously have to argue as to why this lot is better than the best Electros? Hydro, that'd be Nervalette, Farina, Yolana, Mualani. Yeah, you get the idea. Cryo, finally some fair competition. Riesli, Aika, Ganyu, and Shenhe. Yeah, I think Electro beats Cryo's best. Animo, that'd be Xianyun, Kazuha, Xiao, and Farizan. I could see the argument, but Kazuha and Xianyun being here allow Animo to steal the win. Geo, that'd be Navia, Zhongli, Noelle, and Kachina. I'd say the best Electros beat this loss, but don't underestimate Navia. Also, Shilonet may change things, but I can't say anything for certain yet. Dendro, that'd be Nahida, Baiju, Hytham, and Emily. I'm gonna call it a tie here since I don't want to undervalue Chlorand and Fischl. So if we were to rank Electro, it would land as the 4th or 5th best based on that rough look. Obviously, there's so many more variables that could go into it, but if we look at it in a surface level way, then this is the outcome. But does this make Electro mid? After all, sure, Dendro has Nahida and Baiju, but it also has Kave, so who's really winning here? Because at the end of the day, Electro-based teams aren't all that weak, especially if you choose to give Electro the benefit of the doubt and look at how much it has improved as an element since the peak of its dark ages. Sure, much stronger teams exist now, but that doesn't mean that Keqing can't competently clear the Abyss anymore. Genshin's power creep, while it does very much exist now, is quite forgiving. You don't have to play the best team to clear. All you need is a working team with enough investment and you'll be good to go. Regardless of what I say here today, even if a C0 Raiden is all that somebody has, they are still going to clear with said Raiden. Plus, I'd still say that Electro is a lot better than the current worst elements of Cryo and Geo. Chlorant is gonna have no trouble outdamaging an Ito. Seriously, bro needs a buff badly. Think about it like this, it's not that Electro is bad or that Electro characters are bad. Chloriander is an amazing unit, Fischl is a great unit, those two are definitely meta. It's more that the elements above it are just seriously overtuned. Ah yes, don't you love it when Hydro has multiple of the best characters in the entire game as part of its cast? Hydro has literally always been good throughout Genshin's history, and Hydro characters continue to be insane. Arlecchino and Linny are also S-tier characters, and Bennett's reputation precedes him. We all know how good that kid is by this point. Same with Xiangling. Animo is also really hard to beat considering that they have 4VV on their side and Kazuha. Plus, holy smokes, when is Xianyang gonna get a rerun because I have to make at least 100 videos glazing how good she is. So, is Electro mid? Yes, because it is quite literally in the middle. People might hear mid and translate that to bad, which, fair enough, a lot of people do use it that way, including myself. But in this case, mid does mean middling at the end of the day. And the fact that Electro is roughly in the middle, if not a little below, makes it mid. That doesn't make Electro really bad or extremely incompetent. It simply means it's an element that isn't as ludicrously overtuned as some of this game's top elements. Electro is so interesting to discuss because of the long and somewhat shaky history it has had. I do think that if we get more units that are as powerful as Clorox and Fischl, the end result of this video could change someday to shift more in Electro's favor. And I will absolutely reevaluate my position on the matter when that day comes. I think Electro units tend to be very balanced is all. Not super broken, but not absolutely horrendous either, just balanced. But you can let me know your thoughts on the matter down below in the comments as to whether you agree, disagree, or if you have something different to say. Hopefully this video was able to tell you whether Electro is a mid-element or not. This has been Juice, signing out, and fun fact, Keqing's favorite food is also my favorite food.